Welcome to the YU Torah Mitzion Kollel of Chicago and our base medrash right here in the Ida Crown Jewish Academy. Today is Tu B'Shvat, and in honor of Tu B'Shvat we did a school-wide Yom Iyun on topics related to Tu B'Shvat and more broadly the topic of Shemita this year. I invite you to join me now on a quick tour of Shemita coming alive right here in Chicago. We begin with imagine if you were traveling to Israel to buy fruit or vegetables during this year, what are you going to find and how are you going to deal with it? So there are different ways, different stations we can visit for different produce being created and grown in Israel. We begin here with one avenue of how a farmer can sustain themselves during Shemitah. Very often, farmers who live especially in the south of Israel, those in the former Gush Katif, they had agricultural processes that were called chamamot, greenhouses. And this is important for the first avenue in terms of Shemitah, because here's the question. The Talmud Yerushalmi asks, what is the story if I take out the tile floor of my kitchen, there's a roof overhead, in the middle of my kitchen, I make a garden in Israel? Is that subject to the laws of Shemitah? Imagine, here I am, in my house, under my roof, I'm making a garden. So the Talmud Yerushalmi says it's a suffix. Let's put that on the side. Here's another suffix that is discussed by us. Let's say I have an utzitz, a potted plant, and there are no holes in it. Here it is sitting on my chair. If I plant in here, let's say I plant cabbage or lettuce. If I plant in here, is it subject to the laws of Shemitah? That's a question. Let's say I combine the two of them. I put my potted plants inside a house. Well, this house is actually constructed by a tarp. It's a greenhouse. And on the greenhouse, not on the floor, maybe there's plastic sheets on the floor or on a table, I put a series of planters. That was what we call chamamot with matzah minutak. Hothouses, greenhouses with separate, disengaged pots. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the great Gaon who passed away just a few years ago, in that way it is permitted to plant and harvest. There is no sanctity of Shemitah. And this is cited in this remarkable volume, original sources of Halacha Mimekora of Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon. We move on to the next station where we have what's called Otzer Bezdin. See, Chamamot and Matzah Menutak work for vegetables. Otzer Bezdin does not work for vegetables, it works for fruits that grow on trees. Because we know that on Shemitah, one is not allowed to plant, nor is one allowed to harvest. You're allowed to harvest for your personal use. The Mishnah says in Masechah Shvius, if you have a garden, you can go out and pick an apple or two, but you can't be the owner and harvest en masse for commercial purposes. So here's another way to deal with Shemitah when it comes to these things. So we invite our two students from Ida Crown, Yaakov and Noah. I'd like you to pretend that you are farmers. So here you are. Yaakov, you're going to be our farmer all the way in the north of Israel in the Galil. Noah, you're going to be our red apple, our apple farmer all the way in the south. So my grandmother, Baruch Hashem, she is living in Yerushalayim today. She wants to go out and have some apples. So we know that Shemitah means that the field is hefker. It's open to anybody. So she could come to your farm. Let's say she wakes up in the morning. She's looking to make apple pie. She's going to get a green apple from you all the way in the Galil. And then she's going to have to travel all the way to the south. She doesn't drive. All the way to the south to pick up a red apple from you. So how efficient is that? That is very, very difficult. What if we have the following system according to the Tosefta as interpreted by the Ramban? The Tosefta says the following. Yes, you as an individual, Yaakov, and you, Noah, you farmers are not allowed to work your field. But the community, the Beis Din, that's not their restriction. So imagine we invite Rabbi Shamus to come down and we say, Rabbi Shamus, what about the following? Here I am, I'm sitting in Yerushalayim, I'm looking for fruits. I don't want to have to schlep all the way to the north and all the way to the south. What about if you went on behalf of everybody and didn't just take the one fruit that they were allowed to take into their homes? You harvested everything on behalf of the community and brought it right here to disperse. So the Tosefta says, great, so please go for it. Rabbi Shamus, thank you very much. Harvesting all the fruits from the Negev. We'll put it right here. We got our nice little bag. But there's one problem, Rabbi Shamus. Do you think it's really practical for you to go to the north and harvest 10,000 bushels of apples?
Doesn't seem like.
Can I ask you a small question? Do you even know how to harvest apples? Not so well. So you know what? I have a suggestion. Why don't we give you some money to go out and contract someone to harvest those apples? Well, who do you think you should contract? Perhaps Noah and Yaakov. They are our farmers. So instead of them working for their farm, they're actually working for you, the rabbi, and then harvesting on behalf of the community. So in this manner, we create an Otzer Beis Din system where you have some way of sustaining yourself. The fruits themselves have the sanctity of Shemitah because they grew during this year. They were Basar Chanata, by the time they budded was this year. And we're going to sell them in the marketplace at a lower price. We're going to sell them just so we can make enough money to cover the costs for the farmers to harvest it on behalf of the community. That is Otzer Beis Din. It's relevant for fruits, and also will turn into wine one day. I thank both of our farmers and our rabbi. Have a wonderful afternoon. As we move on to our last station, well, what if you don't have the ability to create a situation of hothouses, greenhouses with potted plants? And what if it's not something that can grow on a tree that's going to grow automatically? You have to plant it. Well, here there are several different options in halacha. One of them are what we call peiros shishis, fruits of the sixth year. So fruits that grew during the sixth year, they are not subject to the laws of Shemitah. So let's say you have your carrots that grew during the sixth year. You can hang on to them, you can freeze them, and you can distribute them anytime during the seventh year. The challenge is, though, that Yerakos, vegetables, go basar lakita, and what if you have something that doesn't stay in the freezer, like cucumbers or lettuce or tomatoes that don't freeze very well? So another option, which is discussed, is what we call Yevul Nachri. Yevul Nachri is fruits or vegetables or produce that was farmed by non-Jews during Shemitah. And in the 16th century, Rav Yosef Karo in the Chuvas Avkas Rochel says they are not subject to the sanctity of Shemitah. So that's one option. The other option, which is a possibility, is what we refer to as Heter Mechira. Heter Mechira is a halachic invention that arose over 100 years ago at the end of the 19th century. There was a nascent and budding yishuv, a settlement in Israel, with a small group of farmers. These farmers were barely eking out a living as it was, and now it comes along the Shemitah year, they realize if they don't farm, they would starve. So they sent Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, the Rav of Kovna, the great genius of the generation, who said that just like when you sell your chametz on Pesach, that is permitted, so too you can sell the land of Israel to a non-Jew and then continue to farm. This created a huge debate because the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin, the great Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, opposed this leniency. He said, yes, you may solve the problem of Shemitah, but you have a bigger problem. How can you sell the land of Israel to non-Jews? It's a violation of the pasuk Lo Sechanim. Do not give away the land to them. So it became a great rabbinic controversy. In the 20th century, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, the first chief rabbi of the new Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael, at that time Palestine, he established, on the one hand, it is a legitimate heter that is to be relied upon. On the other hand, there is place for those who do not cast aspersions on the leniency to be stringent and not rely upon it. So this is the leniency of the heter mechira, of selling the produce to non-Jews. And this is a tu'udah. If you were to go to Israel, a fruit that is heter mechira, you'll see that it's marked with this line. So we see that there are different avenues to obtain produce from Israel, whether it's going to be through the chamamot and the matzah menutak, which does not have the sanctity of shvius because of the way it was grown. In addition, the way we had fruits from the sixth year, or potentially from non-Jewish produce. And then, from the strict halachic standpoint, the heter mechira also is not subject to the sanctity of shvius. On the other hand, if you have fruits from Otzer Beis Din, these fruits are subject to the sanctity of Shemitah. According to the Ramban, it's even a mitzvah to eat peiros shvius, and you have to be careful with them because the Chazal teach us that these, because of their sanctity, cannot be destroyed. Lo achla v'lo lehefsid. You can't just throw the leftovers straight into a filthy garbage. So today in Israel, some have a separate pach shmita where they put the leftovers, the sizable leftovers of the fruits that it decomposes, or they put it in a little bag, they wrap it up and they put it into the original garbage. In addition, there is something called biur, at which point you now can no longer consume the fruits, even in your garden. Once it's outside, it's no longer there. So you would have to either be mafgir, make it ownerless, or potentially even destroy it. This is a picture of a field today in Israel that is being organized by the Otzer Beis Din. Either way, whether or not you're going to be consuming peiros, fruits and vegetables that don't have kedusha shvius, or they do have kedusha shvius, this is an opportunity to bring into our lives the message and the sanctity of the relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, specifically through the land of Israel. It's a way to inspire our own lives, even if we're not in Israel, just learning these halachos, connecting to a land and Hashem that is so meaningful to us. Thank you very much.